All right, welcome back to Central Valley Buzz, everybody. I'm your host, Chuck Leonard. How you doing? All right. Hey, Billy, let's bring in our first guest of the day, Mr. Michael Bogart. Hello, sir. How are you?
Yep.
Michael, what are we talking about today?
Well, I'd like to continue to talk about my most recent book, The 45-Minute Bible.
The 45-Minute Bibles. It's pretty popular, isn't it?
I think so. I'd like to think so anyway.
because who's got a whole year to sit down and read the regular Bible when you can do it in 45 minutes?
Well, to be honest and to put a disclaimer out there, the video that I made is 45 minutes. The book version takes slightly longer because of all these...
It depends on how fast you read.
Well, I suppose if you skim it, it could be 45 minutes. But
you wouldn't want to skim this, would you?
Well, it's already condensed enough.
I think a lot of people skim the Bible.
Well, or just skip over it.
That's how they get their understanding of it.
That maybe so.
Right.
That's why there's so much misinformation out there. But we
what are the high points in the 45-minute Bible? Not the end.
Well, okay. So what I've done, and this is an arbitrary thing that I've done, is to take the Old Testament and divide it into 4 sections, and the New Testament and divide it into 4 sections, and basically talk about the themes within each of the sections.
Okay.
It could be done different ways.
Let's talk about the Old Testament, because that's
Sure.
the gnarly one.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. It's the one that people have the most cultural trouble understanding. Because, we're talking...
Because they're parting seas and turning staffs into snakes and making water into wine. Oh, no, that doesn't come yet.
That's water into wine's New Testament.
Right.
But, the Old Testament, the last of the books was probably written 400 or so BC. And so you're talking about a culture that was, 2,500 years ago in a different part of the world, different language. So that's part of the dynamics as well as to why people just get lost in the Old Testament. New Testament's hard enough. That's 2,000 years ago, but the Old Testament's even further back than that.
The Old Testament's just a little bit easier in a movie.
Well, it's got more epic stories in it, perhaps. Yeah, that's right. Moses and the 10 Commandments and all that stuff. Yeah.
So you go through the Old Testament, and then you lighten it up and go into the New Testament.
I wouldn't say I lighten it up, but it's more familiar territory to more people, I would say. And of course, the 4 Gospels is the first section. Then I take the Book of Acts by itself, which is a sort of selected early history of the 30-year history of the early church, and then the New Testament letters, which is all those. Many, many letters. And then the final section I deal with the book of Revelation, which belongs all by itself, I think.
I know that this book is selling. I'm just wondering who's buying it. Are we getting atheists and agnostics buying this book?
Well, it's hard to know. If you get an order with
you don't source them when you sell it to them.
I don't know. I don't know what their convictions are when they order it. Of course, I sell a lot at conferences. I do conferences at churches and other venues, and of course, there it's mainly the Christians buying it. But the online stuff, you have no idea who's buying it.
You're hoping that they are.
Well, I hope so because
they're the ones falling off.
Well, I think so, and I think I told you that story some time ago about my nephew helped me make the video version of it, and he's a professional videographer up in Oregon, and he was just as he was finishing the final production of the video, he had made recontact with an old friend of his from high school who'd become an atheist, and so the atheist was saying things about the Bible, it's this and it's that. And my nephew, who's a pretty strong Christian, is saying, no, it's really not that. You're misinformed. And the guy, and finally my nephew said, why don't you read the Bible for yourself and kind of see what it really is? And the guy says, just like you did, I don't have time for that. And then my nephew thought, oh, I'm making a video called The 45-Minute Bible. So he said, would you watch this video if I gave you a copy? And the guy said, yeah. Week later, the guy calls back and says, well, I have to admit you were right. It isn't any of the things I thought. He
hadn't turned Christian, but it had opened his eyes a little bit.
It had at least gotten the information somewhat where it needs to be.
Did you take some of your other books and videos and give it to that same guy?
Well, see, that's my nephew's contact. I don't even know him, but maybe my nephew did. I hope so.
Because some of your other books are quite interesting also. The understanding the Mormons, understanding Islam. I bet the Islam one's kind of hot right now.
The Islam one is always hot because Islam's always in the news.
Right.
In fact, I don't know if you saw there was a big bombing in Kabul just, what was it, earlier this
try
morning?
To stay away from the news.
Yeah, well, it's depressing sometimes. But Islam always manages to pop up in the news. And even as a Christian, I always have to say, look, it's not all the Muslims that are doing that. Don't blame all the Muslims for that. It's just the radicals. So, it's an interesting and quite popular I have a book version of that and a video version of that as well.
Then you do the Understand the Mormons and Understanding Jehovah's?
Jehovah's Witness.
Is that the other one?
Yep.
Out of those two, which are the most important,
by far,
most popular?
By far the Mormonism one sells.
People are mesmerized by the Mormons.
Right, yeah. They really are, because they also manage to stay in the news. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses manage to keep a very low profile. They don't pop up much. But Mormonism's always...
knocking on doors?
Well, they have that exposure, but they don't make the news very much. It's the Mormons that make the news. So
why are the Mormons making the news? What have they done recently?
They're always making pronouncements about this or that. And they tend to have a very positive profile in public and so forth. And I think they like to keep it that way as well. So, lots of people are curious. And what I do with my books, of course, even though I'm a Christian, I try to present a fact-based view of these things. And I think that's one reason why people appreciate at least some of the things I've done, is because I'm not always trying to slam or twist or spin. I just try to present facts.
All right. Hey, if people are looking for those books or videos, what's the best way for them to get them?
Well, you can go on my website, aspectministries.com, and look under the product page. Or then my commercial site is mindcuisine.com, also under the product tab.
What's the cost on the books and the videos?
Well, basically, I think this is a $14.99 book, but for this week, if anybody would like to order a book and would email me at mike@aspectministries.com, $10. Quite a price. Yep.
All right. This is Michael Bogart, 21st Century Faith. He's here with me every Wednesday. Mike, thanks for coming by.
Always a pleasure, Chuck.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Stick around.